Boom, we live, yes sir. Hey, Facebook family, Twitter world, YouTube, all of my social media sites. Right now, we are blessed to have one of the most well-respected brothers in law enforcement in this area. When I say well-respected, I mean not only in law enforcement, but on the ground with activists, grassroots, community activists. I mean, everybody. This brother has very extensive knowledge in his field. And we want to talk to him about police community relations. With a lot of the stuff going on and the climate that we're in today, America looks like a war zone. So we need brothers, especially black men who are in law enforcement and have that understanding. We're depending on them to give us insight. So we're going to talk to Eric about how police, community policing looks, how it works, his experience, some of the ups and downs, and where we move forward from here. What's going on, Eric? How you doing, brother?
Hey, I'm doing good, bro. How are you, man?
Man, I'm feeling wonderful, man. Glad to have you on. So kind of introduce yourself for the viewers and let everybody know your history.
Well, first of all, look, it's always a pleasure to connect with you, bro. We've connected on many fronts.
Yes, sir.
Had a lot of private conversations, phone call conversations, and I appreciate you, and I love you, and I love what you're doing out there,
right?
Community. Well, hey, I'm from Charleston. I'm a boy that grew up downtown on the east side of Charleston. I graduated from Burke High School, and I can tell you real quick that I got a lot of fortune because of my negative encounters that I had growing up downtown with the police, and just one particular encounter I had with this particular officer. Launched me on a journey that was, in other words, I trusted the police growing up, like many folks, like many kids, black kids in inner city. And this particular encounter was my pivotal moment in life. It kind of rewired my mind, and I wanted to learn, what that officer knew. I wanted to find out what gave him the authority, the power to take my freedom and to do what he did to me that particular hot summer day. And from that point on, I launched myself on a journey of education. I educated myself, and I took a lot of classes. And what I wanted to do in order for us to really address what's broken within the system. I know a lot of folks hate to hear it, but you have to become a part of that system to understand and identify those things that are broken in order to. And that is my journey. That is my goal. And I've been in law enforcement 26 years. I've worked for the sheriff's office. I reached the highest rank there as chief deputy. Now I'm working for Charleston County government as deputy county administrator of public safety, which also involves me being a link between county government and law enforcement.
That's what's up. So, and I hear that when you say that you got into law enforcement because of, a negative interaction. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to hear and understand because, you took matters in your own hand, and I think we have to encourage more black men with experiences like yours to get involved. That's why you see a lot of people gravitate towards you because you understand. So let's talk about some of the climate that's going on right now. We saw Atlanta was in flames a couple of nights ago. We saw even here in Charleston, we had, riots going on and people looting and, just with the, how do you piece all of this together? Being a law enforcement agent and working in law enforcement, how do you see all of this right now unfolding? Where do you see some of the pitfalls and take us to, let us go into your mind and see, what do you see?
Look, this is a system like any other man-made system that's broken. Okay, let's be real. It's not a perfect system. It's a system that's ran by men. So it has its flaws. Community police is a process based on relationships. You have to establish that trust between law enforcement and the community. And there's 3 ways you can do that as far as recruiting more minorities into your police department. Now, they will tell you that it's hard to recruit minorities. I will agree. Look, I played a part in that recruitment process. But what my argument here is that you have to think outside the box. You have to You have to make your organization appear to be more welcoming to those individuals that you're trying to attract, or those individuals that you're lacking within your organization. Look, what happened in Minneapolis was wrong. It was wrong. It showed a lack of sanctity of life for another human being. So let's just put that out on the table right now. That was totally wrong, and it was right for the officer to be arrested. What happened in Atlanta, that's an unfortunate incident, and I think the mayor did the right thing by firing that officer. I think the chief of police did the right thing by stepping down. But this is the thing, Shakim. This is much bigger than George Floyd or what happened in Atlanta. We have to go back in history and understand the reason why certain communities respond the way they do when acts like this happen. You have to understand the history of policing in America to understand that. So I try to encourage leaders, and I teach at the FBI Academy every 2 or 3 months. And so what I'm telling you, I share with police chiefs and sheriff at the national level. In order for you to really have your officers, your deputies to understand what community policing is all about, you have to first educate them on the history of policing in this country. And it's not a good picture. It's meant to provoke awkward moments, awkward discussions. And you have to have a real honest dialogue that this is the reason why these particular communities respond the way they do towards law enforcement. So it's a process. It's just like a marriage, boyfriend, girlfriend relationship. You have your ups and downs. It's why you have to be consistent across the board. And leaders have to claim ownership, make it their number one initiative, that they really, really encourage and enforce strong community engagement within the organization. And also the community have to play a role in this too as well. Mm-hmm. Within your own community, you have to claim ownership. Okay, it's easy to criticize law enforcement. I can tell you right now, the vast majority of cops are great people. Why? Because I'm a part of that environment, and I can tell you they hurt, they cry, just like you and I. So they're not perfect, but it's one way you can really address a culture in an organization. Is number one, I want you to listen here now. Through training, right? Training is one way. You have to have a strong worded policy enforcing your training. Third, you have to have an aggressive supervision system in place. Whereas when your training lacks, your policy is violated, that supervisor or leaders have to take strong disciplinary action against these officers. I mean, suspension, termination, whatever the case may be. Don't sit on it. That's the only way you can truly get a hold on a broken system and start correcting a toxic culture.
That's interesting. So let's talk about one of the things we all talk about is like encouraging young black men to be law enforcement, because a lot of time we feel like, man, I don't trust the police. Why I want to be a police? And all of these negative things that the black community has when they look at a black law enforcement from an ignorance perspective, because people don't really know you. They just see a black cop and they feel like, oh, these are the worst ones. What do you have to say to people who might have that negative stereotype but don't really know?
Let me tell you a real quick story about this black young kid growing up on the east side of Charleston.
Okay.
One summer day, after playing basketball with some friends, it was a black cop and a white cop that showed up on the projects and tried to engage us in conversation. Something they never did before when I was growing up. And this is when NWA came out with a song. You know what song that was? And the friend blasted that rap song loud on the block. Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? That irritated the police. That pissed the police off. Yeah. What happened? Those cops got agitated and demand that those black boys, if you don't live on a project, you must go. You must leave. So this one cop approaches one kid who was sitting on the hood of a car and asks this kid, "Where do you live?" And the kid pointed down the street, down a porch. "I live right there. I can throw a brick and bust my window." Well, that cop said, "Well, get your black butt home." Well, obviously that kid clapped back and said, "I'm already home." Mm. So what happened? This cop proceeded to grab the kid, pick him up, slammed him on his head, handcuffed him.
Mm.
That kid was me.
Mm.
All right, that kid was me. 17 years old. So I can relate to a lot of things that's happening around this country involving black males. I can relate that. Do I think all cops are bad? No. You have a small percentage of cops that has to be identified and recognized. The only problem with cops when we make mistakes, someone either get killed, like what happened in Atlanta,
Right.
what happened in Minneapolis, or someone gets seriously hurt, or someone's freedom get taken away from them without cause. But that what I wanted to change my environment. I wanted to police my community differently. And so I encourage, when I go out and speak to kids, young kids, I tell them all the time, look, if you want to really change or affect change, become a part of the system. Understand, educate yourself, be employed by the system, serve your community that way. That way you can help affect change, have an immediate impact within your community.
Right. What do you think about citizens review boards?
Well, I've evolved over that. My mentality with that evolved over time. Mm-hmm. I think it's a tool that is necessary to hold police chiefs and sheriffs accountable for their lack of inaction and involving their officers. I welcome it. I welcome it. I don't see a problem with it. It's you're moving the shade, opening the blinds up, and you're allowing a community that's used swore to protect and serve eyes to evaluate, examine your department and your policy and the actions of your officers. I don't have a problem with that. And I will tell you, initially, when I first got in law enforcement, I served 5 years in internal affairs. And they'll tell you that internal affairs is there as a blanket. That's true. That's true in itself. However, you tend to show bias in investigations when it's involving your own. Particularly if you don't think the community is aware of it, you tend to pat him on the back and send him on, and then he gets fired, and he ends up, or she ends up in another department. So look, I welcome Citizens Review Board. I think it's a tool that will hold everyone accountable, and that way you also would be able to educate those members on that board how police officers work, how agencies work. Just because you have a review board doesn't mean that it's going to solve the problem. No, it's not going to solve the problem because it's still happening. However, you allow the community to have an input on your department, your policies, and also your personal actions. So I don't see a problem with that. I welcome it.
Okay. Man, I see a couple comments, man. They're talking about why you haven't run for sheriff yet. They say Eric Watson for sheriff, for president. What?
Yeah,
in the future, would you ever consider that in the future? I mean, I know not now. You got a lot of things going on, but maybe in the future. What?
I'm not a politician. First of all, I'm not a politician.
Right.
I have a much wider impact with this platform.
Right.
That's me. Who knows? But that's not my goal. My goal is to educate the community, educate our kids, help you out, community activists. When you call me, you got me out 8:30 at night on Facebook Live. Check you. So this is what I'm all about. I'm not about the politics. I'm about doing what's right and correcting bad behavior and hopefully helping the community as a whole grow. I mean, that's my goal.
Right. So let's talk about the case with Breonna. Man, that was real unfortunate. So we've been hearing a lot about no-knock raids. I had a couple of law enforcement officers say, "Hey, man, no-knock raids sometimes save our lives." I mean, the element of surprise is, sometimes what we need, because you never know if somebody's armed. Somebody might be dangerous. Then on the other side, some people are saying, "No, man, we need to get rid of it in totality." What's your understanding? What's your view on no-knock raids?
I can argue for both ways. Look, every search warrant is dangerous.
Right.
A bunch of unknowns. There's a bunch of unknowns when you execute a search warrant in a home, a business. There are a bunch of unknowns. I can tell you, I've been on a SWAT team for about 5 years. I can tell you, SWAT standards has changed over time. In other words, it has evolved. Whereas SWAT teams no longer actually just kicking a door and hey, yell SWAT, SWAT, SWAT.
Right.
They surround the area. They do a call out. They do a call out to avoid those kind of deadly encounters. You have to definitely evaluate no-knock warrants. It can, yes, it does protect officers. With the same token, it also lends the possibility, like Brianna, someone innocent getting shot multiple times, and you cannot use the excuse as you didn't know. Right. But a knock warrant has to be signed by a judge, so you can't always hold the officers or the agency responsible. It got to be signed by a judge, and that department has to articulate the reason why they want a no-knock warrant to execute at home. And most departments nationally have a checkoff list. Look for things like animals in a home, kids. So if you reach certain criteria, the no-knock warrant won't apply. They'll take a different approach with it. So I can argue both ways. What I would tell you is that I think we need to reevaluate how those no-knock warrants are executed.
Okay. So when we're talking about community policing, right? Because I want to jump into that because I see a couple comments with people talking about community policing. What does that look like to you?
Community policing in the 21st century, we have to deal with all the basketball games and the football games and the barbecues and the ice cream firing around. To me, that's an old way of thinking. Okay. I think community policing, I would get away from policing. Community engagement, we should require an educational component. Let's educate the community and the kids about their roles as citizens, our role as law enforcement officer. I think that should be the core of community engagement. The basketball games, football games, yeah. If you want a touchy-feely, program, just to check off the box, yeah, go for it. Now, mind you, what I'm telling you, I've shared up there in Quantico about community program, policing programs. And I think we ought to get away from the old way of thinking in terms of flag football, barbecues, things like that. And let's focus more on educating the community, our kids of all races, their role as citizens and their role of interacting with law enforcement. And let's try to bridge that gap of trust. So when I go to schools and speak with kids around the community, I don't talk basketball, although they may ask about basketball, football. I don't talk basketball. I don't speak on football, no sports. I give my background, and then I try to educate them how important their role is in society if they want to affect change in the community.
Right. So Tori, I see Tori got a comment. He said we need to hire more young African American police officers, and we talked about that. So let me just talk about diversity really quick. Like I remember several years ago we were talking about diversity in police departments and the lack thereof, and a lot of basically discrimination within the department. How can citizens, like, I mean, I don't know if we should be minding our business or whatever, but how can we push for more diversity in police departments? Like, we want to see more black, I guess, supervisors or black, majors or whatever. How do we hold our local police departments accountable for diversity when we know that diversity is a good thing and that's needed?
Easy answer. Vote. Vote. This is my thing. If diversity is very important. Yes, racism exists throughout this country. So there's no department that's immune from racism. So if someone say, "Hey, I don't have those kind of issues within my department," I have to look at them double time and say, "Hey, let's reevaluate that." Number one, executive leaders have to take ownership of the importance of diversity within the organization. If you don't come out openly and express yourself, why is it important that your department becomes diverse or diverse? Diversity is like this right here. If you bring minorities in, Hispanics in, or any brown people in. That's a way to educate everyone, the white officers, the black officers, about each other's culture. So you won't have these problems circulating and circulating. So diversity plays a key role. You can hold them accountable by voting. You'll hold them accountable by going to city council meetings, county council meetings, and putting pressure on your policymakers. That is the only way you can affect change. Now, also, the community have to claim ownership too as well. You know, for example, I'll say you and Tori, who's watching us. You all know a lot of people, a lot of black guys who are skeptical about joining law enforcement.
Right.
You know, there's a way that you can sit down with those guys, ladies, and speak with them about the importance of becoming part of the system. It don't have to be police, law enforcement. It can be EMS, dispatch. It can be search and rescue, fire. There's many ways that they can become a part of the system. Don't have to necessarily go into law enforcement, but become a part of the system to educate themselves on how that would work.
Okay. Next question. Brother said, what's your thoughts on de-escalation training?
De-escalation training is being taught around the country, but this is the thing. You have to know how to communicate first. Period. I can tell this take, and I'm not trying to litigate what happened in Atlanta, but it's very basic. If you look at what happened in Atlanta, I like to really reserve my thoughts until everything comes out. Yeah. Look at it in a manner. Based on the body cam and the initial encounter he had with the young man, he gave him all the clues. You know, he was talking to him. He was like, "Hey, being compliant, being respectful. You could have. I've done this not 1,000 times, but a few times. Hey, how far do you live from here? Okay, do you have a cell phone? Do you have a cell phone? Give me a number. I can call your relative to come by and pick you up. You cannot drive. Give me the keys to your car. Cannot drive. I'm here to help you out. Now, if all those things don't pan out, well, I got one option. You got to go to jail. But you have to communicate. You have to communicate. And he gave them all the signs. Hey, pick up the phone and make. It's very simple. We have to police in a much smarter way and use common sense and know how to communicate. So de-escalation requires good communication skills and listening, and get away from that warrior mentality.
Right.
We're guardians first. You know, not warriors first. We are guardians first.
Wonderful. All right, next question. Sister said, I feel it's important that police officers should be trained on how to handle mental illness people. That's real important. Is there training now on how to deal with people with mental illnesses? Like, is there a special type of way you handle that?
Yes, each police department or agency has their own policy. I can tell you, working with the sheriff's office, that this is something that has been embedded in our organization for years. That they involve mental health during the course of their operations. With that said, police are tasked with doing a number of things, and if you don't have mental health available at the time, well, that police officer have to be a mental health counselor, a teacher, a parent. So those things require skills, and that's why it's very important that we do incorporate mental health training in your overall training system.
Okay, so I mean, and that's kind of crazy, right? Because how do you know? And I'm just thinking about it from an officer's perspective. Like, how do I know this person has a mental illness? Like, I mean, there's signs. Like, I mean, what do they teach? Because at the end of the day, I mean, how do I know? I mean, how do I know this person is schizophrenic? How do I know this person is manic depressive? You know, like, how can I diagnose these on the spot? Like, is that unfair to me as an officer that I have to sit and, you know, diagnose this person, and I'm fearing for my life at the same time?
And you just hit it on the head. Most officers can't identify that until later on during the encounter with that person. But by the time he recognized the problem is already escalated to a point, their use of physical forces is used, or deadly force is used against that person. And that's why it's very important that training do take place. Not every once in a while. You have to make that a mandatory training. process, part of your what we call block training, and get away from your all the other basic training that we was taught 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's time to modernize police departments across the country. That's all.
Ooh, so when you say modernize, I like how that sounds. What? So how do you mean modernize? Like where is it now, and how do you make it modern?
Well, number one, by involving the community in your policy development, adapting with change. Society is changing. Society is becoming more diverse. More people from around the world they're coming here to this country. So that means you have to develop your training program, your training systems to understand the different cultures going forward. No longer can we walking around with the bully sticks or PR-24s and that's it and a gun. You have a lot of options now, but you also have to understand that you have to stick with the basics, bring your community in, be transparent as possible, help them, nothing wrong, asking them to vote. You can form a group, a committee, and have them to evaluate your policies from a critical standpoint, with saying that they're going to be critical of you. That's what you want. You want them to criticize your policy because you're thinking too much like a cop. So bring like yourself, bring someone like you, some other community activists in to evaluate the policies. That way, we will be able to identify things that we're missing. We're not seeing. Why? Because we're thinking black and white, law, policy, and when in actuality, we have to think much broader scale involving the community.
Right. And a while back I saw I can't remember what I was watching. I don't know, it might have been Killer Mike or something, but they actually had a simulation to where like community leaders or activists or whatever could go in and they would simulate certain scenarios that an officer would be in, and they'd have to either shoot or not shoot, or somebody do like this and they pull out their wallet and are you familiar with that? I saw it, but I didn't.
Yeah, I saw that clip a while. It was probably about a year or two ago, where you bring community members in and you give them a scenario based on how they will respond. If they're the officer, how they will respond to domestic traffic stop, and you watch them. And I guarantee you, they will make mistakes. They'll realize that I didn't realize this is complicated. Officers are asked to make split-second decisions. Think about it. We spend 12 weeks at the academy. Lawyers spent 4+ years getting law degrees, and we're asking officers, to make that split-second decision between life and death. That's very short time, and the probability of you making a mistake is high because you talk about emotions, adrenaline. All those things play a part in making a decision, and then when you realize that you overstep your boundaries, well, it's too late because someone is dead or falsely arrested.
Okay. All right. So, do you believe that there should be more time in the training or the academy? Should they lengthen that time period?
I think the way we are training right now, we only have one academy.
Okay.
Academy, and I'm not being critical here, but the academy is not geared towards community policing. They teach you the basic of law enforcement. They don't teach you about the history of law enforcement. They don't teach you about community policing. They may have started recently. De-escalation is not really a focus point. All those things, all those training right there are required that the local departments train their officers on those aspects. And I think we need to look at how we train folks at the academy. If we really want to transform or reform law enforcement here in this state, I think we have to stop thinking the old ways, and it's time to reevaluate law enforcement across the board. And I'm not being critical of law enforcement. I mean, this is an organization. This is a profession I've grown to love.
Right.
I have friends, I have families that follow my footsteps. That got in law enforcement. So I respect the man and woman that wear the badge and carry the gun. I understand the sacrifice, but we have to be willing to criticize ourselves to correct the problem. We just can't be pro-police or pro-community. We have to understand that In order, when you swore an oath to protect and serve, that requires sacrifice. That requires you to understand everything involving community-based, police-oriented, and also what's your role as a guardian, not as a warrior.
Ooh, man, and I like that. Not as a guardian and not a warrior, and that's the mentality I think that's really going to help out is when you start to, I guess, see yourself as being a guardian and not just going in and being a cowboy and trying to lock people up and take them to jail and things like that. Do you believe, and a lot of people, and I think they was talking about this on Roland Martin the other day. I kind of watch Roland Martin here and there and kind of tune in, but they were talking about systemic racism. Do you believe that there is a systemic problem, or do you think it's just maybe individual problems and you can kind of, have to weed it out on an individualization? Do you think individual basis? Do you think it's systemic or individual?
I think it's more of a policy and process problem, more than being a racist problem. I think it's more that it's a policy and process problem, and the lack of transparency. And that's when you don't have open transparency across the board, if you're one of those leaders that is not willing to accept criticism on your policies, you are welcoming these kind of stigmas. You know what I'm saying? You are welcoming folks to call your department racist or that kind of stuff, because you are refusing to be transparent with your policies. You are refusing to allow folks, community in to evaluate your policies. And then when there's a problem within your organization, then that's when you want to reach out to the community for understanding. Well, it's too late for that. You need to make them a part, allow them to be a part of the process from the very beginning. For example, I'm gonna tell you, Mother Manual. You remember that?
Yep. Yep.
Let's talk about that real quick. I'm gonna tell you, I was down there.
Oh yeah.
An hour after it happened, and I left. I stayed about 4:00 that morning. Let me tell you how the protest and Charleston was not burnt to the ground. It was not law enforcement that stopped that. It was community leaders. I'm gonna tell you, Tory's still on there.
Oh yeah, he's still on there. Yep.
Tory Fields, Jerome Haywood, Mike Brown, Pastor Dixon, Elder Johnson, Wendell Gilliard. How I know? I saw those guys down there. I was part of the prayer circle with them. That's why it's very important that you have strong leaders, like communities, like those individuals right there, as part of your planning stage. It's not about the egos. It's about what's doing what's right to protect your city and prevent it from burning down and prevent riots from happening.
Right.
Follow me? And that is the reason why Charleston pretty much stayed strong for 10 days. Not that one night, but 10 days following that, because those guys played a key role in making sure that peace was maintained in the city of Charleston.
Right, and you're definitely right. And I see it, you can really tell when community leaders get involved in situations and things like that, because even me myself, you see people who and you can say, man, come on, man, y'all guys chill out, and they respect that. They're kind of all right, big dog, man. And they respect that, and I think that's very critical, because we all have the ability to reach certain people and certain demographics. And when you pull us together, it's a high likelihood that we can cover all grounds, whether it's law enforcement, community. We all know somebody, whether I know somebody on 10 Mile or Wayland, and somebody on Remount and Ackaby and the Heights. So all of us really know people in these areas. So if something ever was to get in a situation where it got bad, it'll be a multitude of people who say, yo, listen, just chill. Not just one person, but a bunch of people. And I think that's a good point. I saw a question. Somebody, somebody. I got all these questions on here. Good gracious. Okay, you addressed that. Training. Okay, so somebody asked about up training. Like, how often does up training occur? We know that, when you first get out the academy and things, you go through training, but like, how does up training work throughout an officer's career?
Well, each department is different. It's all based on funding, budgeting, and your priority.
Right.
They put in for certain classes, and that's another thing that should be addressed, is because you need to put your officers on a career path. Have your core training, your core value training, which should include community policing, the history of law enforcement in this country, de-escalation, mental health training. Get those key training out the way, and then you move into your specialized training, like investigations, patrol, narcotics. Too often we shift towards the specialized training and forget about the core training. The core training is valuable because you're gonna have your average encounter with a person on the street is very basic. If you don't understand the importance of communicating with an individual or a citizen on the street, or you have not mastered de-escalation skills, or if you're poor at communication, you're gonna fail. You're gonna fail. It's why when you had your food bank out there last year, a few years ago, I made a point to bring out recruits.
Right.
That was a way of me educating them, both black and white, the importance of community. Now, some didn't like it. I'll be honest, some didn't like it. But I made a point. You don't like it, but guess what? You're going to do it because this is part of community-based policing. So if you don't understand that importance, you're in the wrong profession. I'll say turn your badge in and just go ahead and find another occupation, because you're in the wrong line of work.
Right. So so the history of policing, we've heard you talk about that as being a very intricate piece of the puzzle. Why is learning the history of policing so important with engaging and interacting with the public?
Because that will help you understand the reason why minority communities respond the way they do towards law enforcement. I don't care if the police officer is black or white. You represent government. You're a tool of government. Many years during the slavery days, it was a thing called slave patrol. Okay, when a slave would break free from the plantation, well, what happens? Okay, they would send slave patrols out to recapture them,
right,
discipline, and sometimes kill them, hang them. Okay, that is generational effect to this day, and that is the reason why minority communities still look at government as being a tool that was used to oppress them. Mind you, the laws, certain laws in this country was used to oppress minority communities, and the police, which I represent, was used as a tool to enforce those laws. You follow me?
Right.
So, and those tools were used primarily in the minority communities. So that's the reason why that attitude still exists. So if you don't educate your department on the true history of policing, which is not a right, you are failing your organization. You are failing the young men. When I was chief deputy of operation with the sheriff's office, every recruit class that comes in, I would take my time with them for about 30 minutes and give them a brief rundown about myself, the reason why I got in law enforcement, and also a quick history lesson on the reason why certain communities responds to law enforcement in a negative way. I don't care if that officer is black or white. What they're seeing is a uniform, a tool that was used many years ago to oppress their community for years. And that still lies true today. That mentality still exists today. So how do we change the mentality? Through education. And we encourage them to become a part of the system. Serve our community, help us serve our community, so we can go ahead and correct the broken issues within the system.
Ooh, man, that's real there. So let's talk about the FBI Academy, right? Because I think that is probably one of, in law enforcement, that's looked at as one of the most prestigious, academies. Like you say, the FBI Academy, you start thinking about all these TV shows and, these well-organized group of people and investigators and things like that. How did you get to where you're at now? What was your process? Because a lot of people look up to you like, man, how do you get to that point to where you can influence the mind of, young men and women who are, going to the FBI Academy for training and to be guardians in the community? Like, how did you get to this point?
I try to lead how I was raised. You know, I was raised by a single mother who kept me humble, who was humble herself. And relationship building. I met a good friend of mine, Quentin Williams. He and I connect many years ago down here when I brought him to the sheriff's office to start culture-based training for us, because I understand the importance of that. Based on that, we shift our training to Quantico, FBI National Academy, and where we talk about the same. Now, these discussions are meant to be awkward.
Right.
It's not designed to be pleasant. Okay, we're talking about racial issues. How can we help your department? How can we help you think differently as a law enforcement executive when it relates to community-based policing? Okay, so that's why I got started at FBI National Academy. He's coming back down here again to teach the sheriff office again on racial-based issues. So you have to build relationships, and it's key to make. If you're not willing to have these discussions within your department, if you're not willing to bring your command staff in and sit down with them and tell them your position on diversity, bias-based training, I think you have failed your organization. I think you have failed the community. I think it's time for you to do like a doctor's check.
Right.
You know, reevaluate yourself as a leader.
Right. So like, just say, I'm a law enforcement officer. So I go on Remount Road. Of course, it's a highly populated with Hispanic and Latinos. And I might get a call out on the Macon where it's a lot of, young brothers in crime. Or I might get working in Westcott, where, you have upper class, middle class white people. Like, do you have scenario? Like, how do you talk to officers about wearing different hats and communicating with different communities during different interactions?
Look, the same way you police in Westcott, you should police in Acme.
Okay.
There's no difference. Yeah, you can say the crime is high in that area. That's irrelevant to a point, because you're policing. Okay, you're being proactive. Yeah, you may have increase of crime in certain parts of North Charleston, but it's, again, goes back to the warrior versus guardian mentality.
Ooh, okay.
So if you wake up in the morning, don your uniform, wear your badge, carry your gun, and the first thing comes to mind is who I'm going to arrest, you got a problem. Yeah, that's a warrior mentality. Everyone I see is a bad guy. No, you don't. No, you have good white people, good black people. You have bad white people. You have bad black people. So you just cannot target. You cannot just take the scattergun approach anymore, and just look at the community as a whole as being bad people. You have to do smart policing and target your audience. I mean, your enforcement activities with the understanding that we got to lead as guardians first and warriors second.
Okay, so where does the country go from here? Like, with all this right now, man, I mean, it seems like everybody is talking about defunding the police, and which I think is ludicrous. And they always say, well, we don't really mean that, but they keep using the word. But we don't really mean that, but, we keep using the word. And everybody, they're setting up autonomous zones and, police free. So right now, like, I've never seen nothing like this in my life ever. Like, where does the country go from here? Like if you was in leadership, right? Like the nation's top law enforcement, like how do you resolve these issues?
Look, I have a hope. I believe in an American dream. I think we will get past this right here. I'm totally against the word defunding. Yeah. That's stupid. Don't make sense at all. So when I hear the word defund, okay, let's go ahead and do it with all law enforcement in this country. What you gonna have? Chaos. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. What they're trying to say, let's reallocate funds.
Okay.
To the police department. Well, I can see an argument for that. Yeah, I think you in your budget, you should have a certain amount of money set aside for mental health training, for diversity training, for use of force training. Those kind of things. You say, hey, chief, I'm gonna set aside $3.5 million or $5 million in your budget. You can only use those funds for these reasons. Period. That way you hold them accountable. They have to make sure they use those funds for those trainings. Period. Training period. That's way. So this is a process. Like any other process, it takes time. This is a culture that has been embedded for years in this country. You have to educate the community. You have to rethink the way you train your officers. The police in the 21st century, we are becoming more diverse. We are more globally connected right now. Who would ever thought that coronavirus that started in China would have ended up here impacting Charleston, South Carolina, where it has. So we are connected. So we have to think along those lines. Things that happen affects Minneapolis, New York, Florida, eventually will come down to us. So we have to just rethink how we train our officers. We have a much younger, diverse police force that's coming online. So now is the time for us to start retraining them, rewiring their minds to think differently. Get away from the war mentality. You still need that to a point, but let's focus on building that guardian mentality first, and then the warrior second.
Right. So how do you feel? Like, I can only imagine, like, how do you feel when you just see all these videos? I mean, right now, if I post a video with somebody arguing with the police, it's going to go viral. I mean, I could turn around tomorrow and the shares are through the roof. You know, I got a viral video. Like, how does that make, like, law enforcement officers feel when, you know, you're trying to do what's right and what's exact, and then, you know, you're just looking on social media all day? And I know you probably go down your timeline and be like, good, like, doggone, like
it's depressing, and I can tell you, officers feel as though they're under attack, rightfully so, because all you see on national news is officers being, you know, shooting someone in the back or killing someone, and it's being broadcast across the world.
Right.
We although we wear different colored uniform, but we represent one profession, and that's law enforcement. So it's a fair assessment for them to think that we're being attacked. So that's why we have to always keep a balanced approach, you know, because just because you have one officer bad in Atlanta does not mean Atlanta PD is bad. Same thing with Minneapolis, you know. So we just can't lump that one officer into a basket with good apples and say all the good apples are now bad. You know, no, that don't make any sense. You just have to have strong policies, strong training, strong policy, and very aggressive supervision to correct a culture that exists in law enforcement.
Woo, that's good. So, you know, locally here, what do you have as far as advice to give to people in the community, like activists, people who consider themselves, or people consider leaders? Like, how do we assist in trying to make better and safer communities, on top of, you know, great community policing with officers? How do we build that bridge and make the situation better?
I think two ways. Number one, you're gonna hold your policymakers accountable.
Okay.
You know, when they make mistakes, you know, I understand you may be friends with this one, that one, but when they make mistakes, you have to hold them accountable for the officer's action. They're at the very top. The buck stops with you. You know, so with that said, you also have to take your time and try to educate your followers, your communities, as to what's going on with an organization, and educate them. And just welcome. Just what I would say. Hey, if you're upset with what's going on in law enforcement, let's talk about getting you in the system. Let's talk about you considering being a cop. Let me introduce you to somebody who's already in law enforcement that can walk you through the process, through the steps of becoming a cop. If you don't want to be a cop, what about being an emergency medical service technician? What about being a fireman? We have to encourage minorities to be willing to serve the community by doing public service. I mean, either running for office, they're becoming a teacher, a police officer, a fireman, EMT. We are failing our community. Why? Because we are not properly educating them and showing them the value of public service. You can't get rich doing it, but guess what? You can have an immediate impact on your community without going through all the red tapes, because now you're actually involved in a process.
Ooh, man, that's what's up, man. Hey, I appreciate you, man. My comment section is looking lit, man. I'm on Twitter, all of that, man. Everybody likes this discussion, and a lot of I can't hear what you say.
You have me on Twitter?
Oh yeah. You on Twitter, Facebook? Yeah, I got you on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Hey, bro, I don't want to go viral, man. So don't do that.
Right. But man, everybody's loving it, man. I mean, everybody really is loving it, and you know, they're saying, let me see what my mama says. My mama.
You have a mom on
your are encouraged. The fear and ill feelings have to be removed. Right. So I think that's what you was explaining. Like, you know, how do we get rid of those that fear and those ill will towards officers? Like, how do we get rid of that and then, you know, make them say, okay, I want to try this? And I saw you talk about that through your example. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have to continue hitting home the importance of community engagement. You have, in order for it to happen, you have to be consistent across the board through education. When an officer make a mistake, you need to come out openly and discuss with the community what happened, and then use people like yourself as a tool that we can use to bring people into the forum and educate them about community policing or community engagement, and then try to encourage them. I'll use it as a recruitment tool. Try to encourage them to be a part of the system. I recruited a number of folks for the sheriff's office. Some left, some are still there. You know, because they realize within 5 years, you're gonna know whether or not you love the profession or you don't. So I try to encourage them through communication, through dialogue, and yes, they hit roadblocks from time to time. And yes, there are not too many minorities in law enforcement. That's why they kind of migrate towards other blacks within law, because they don't have that many of them that look at themselves. So they want someone that can understand them across the board, and that's why it's very important that leaders understand that. You know, it's not about the leaders. It's about what's right for the organization, period. I mean, you have to bring somebody in from the outside, if necessary, and educate your staff, your organization, the importance of diversity, period.
Right. All right. So last question, because people been talking about, how do you feel about the demilitarization of the police?
Yeah. Look, those tools, I understand we can't militarize police completely, all right, because this is America. We don't need tanks, tanks on the streets of, Charleston, right? But those tools, number one, it helps cut costs. Those tools save lives, actually. This, for example, is a SWAT call out. You have a mentally ill person in a home with a shotgun, with a rifle. Well, that personnel carrier, that tank, will allow those SWAT officers and negotiators to go within a block, go in the front door of that home and start a dialogue. Right. How I know, I've been there many times. So those tools does serve a purpose. However, you have to be careful about appearing too militarized when we have protest, when we have riots, because it incites.
Right.
Due to the fire now.
Yeah.
When folks see that, when folks see tanks and riot helmets and gear, I understand.
Yeah, everybody.
they're gonna rebel. Kids, right? Your kids are gonna rebel at some point.
Yeah.
We have to be very smart, and that's why we require people like yourself, community leaders, as part of that fold, part of that operation discussion. Whereas we can say, hey, look at Shakim, I need your help. We have a major protest coming up. I'm not asking you to be a policeman, but I'm asking you to help me manage this protest if you can, by your voice, by your face, and that's it. And you'll be surprised how well that'll go with the crowd.
Word. Oh man, well that's good. I want to take. Hey, this has been fun, and I think this needs to be done more. I mean, really. I mean, especially in this particular environment. We have to be able to engage more and show the other side, because it's so much propaganda out there. Like I said, I right now, I admire you so much, because I don't know, and I'm gonna be honest, man, that video in Atlanta, man, I might have started shooting too. I mean, that's just, I mean, I don't have no training, so I just got beat up or something, and somebody grabbed my taser, and I'm like, oh, hold up, So that's where the training comes in at. I don't have that type of training.
You're talking about how can you manage discretion?
Right. Ooh.
It's hard for a leader to manage an officer's discretion. It's up for that officer to control his emotions, his adrenaline, understand, and that muscle memory came into play when he did that. I'm not saying I'm not going to litigate it, but it's very hard for a chief or a sheriff to manage an officer's discretion because they're out there by themselves. They're being asked to make that split-second decision, and I think it was what happened in Atlanta. It was not a good ending. Yeah. So I think the mayor made the right call, firing that officer, because you have to. Now it didn't prevent Atlanta from burning.
Right.
Burned one or two buildings, but that at least kind of calm community to a point, with the acknowledgement that, hey, I'm acknowledging that my officer made a mistake, and that's why and that's what the community is looking for. It shouldn't be a month, 2 months before you decide that you're going to fire or take action against an officer. This is a clear cut case. Go ahead and call it.
Right. All right. Last question. Somebody wants to know, what do you, in the wake of the Ahmaud Arbery case, what do you think about citizens' arrest? Do they need to be done away with?
Well, yeah, that's a good one. I think there's a lot of pros and cons to it, bro. Honestly, I think that law need to be reevaluated. I think there's a reason for it there, okay, but I think it need to be reevaluated, rewritten the way it is now. And every state is different. Every state is different. They have different wordings for their citizens arrest. Do I encourage citizens to go out there and make an arrest? I'm gonna tell them no. Because now it's your word against that guy's word, and if that guy that person used force against you, it's called a criminal investigation. We're not going to. An officer just can't say, "Hey, since he said he's making citizens arrest, I'm going to side with him." It don't work that way. It doesn't work that way. So you better use common sense, because you end up like those guys in Georgia.
Right. Okay. Hey, man, I appreciate you, Eric, man. Hey, brother, man. Hey, this was real, man, and we gotta do this more often and keep getting the word out, man. And I thank you for being. Hey, and y'all, man, I got a lot of viewers on here now. One thing, and I'm gonna say this one thing about brother Eric right here is all of us in the community, we know that when we see him, this brother operates with integrity. The brother has a good heart. He's fair. As y'all can see, very intellectual. And I think his insight today on the future of policing and how we should modernize policing is very key, very critical. I see a lot of people, we've already talked about that. So when this ends, y'all gonna have to go back about diversity and police departments, because people keep asking me about it too, but he's already said that. So after this is over, y'all go back. I'll let them in on that, because everybody's now talking about it, but we already talked about it at the beginning. So more people have joined on, and now they asking about diversity. But okay, all right. So let me let you because people are saying like, okay, do you believe that the officers should look like the neighborhoods they represent? Like, people are talking about, how does does that really mean anything? Is that meaningful?
Look here, we gotta be careful with that, because if you think about it, back in when blacks first was hired into law enforcement or became part of law enforcement, they were only allowed to police the black communities.
Ooh, right.
So you're telling me, so you want us to go back 40 years? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter the officer is black or white. It's the message he's bringing. It's how he's policing. It goes back to educating your workforce, black and white, on the history of law enforcement and community engagement. So I'm hearing people saying, "Hey, we need black officers to police black communities." That don't make no sense to me. Oh, okay, now you're gonna have white officers. You're going back to 1960s, 1950s, and it was a hot mess. Don't make any sense. at all. So we have to really think smart about the comments that we're making about this black police back in. Look, let's educate our organization on the importance of diversity. On culture-based training, bias-based training. Let's do that first. It doesn't matter if the officer is black or white. I think a white officer can be just as effective in a black community, and vice versa, a black officer in a white community. You can't pick and choose. You can't pick and choose what officer you put in the communities. You just can't. It doesn't make any sense. If I'm a leader of an organization, I'm gonna tell you, I'll laugh at you. It's not going to happen.
Right.
That's my officer. He's going to not communicate. Now, if he cannot communicate with a diverse community, now guess what? He have to leave. Plain and simple. I mean, so we have to be careful with that, Shakim. Saying I want black officers back in the black communities. Would I help? No. If that officer, that Minneapolis, if that officer was black and they did the exact same thing, guess what? We will still have protests and riots, because what they're seeing is uniform. They're seeing a government that's killing a man, a human being. That's plain and simple. So yeah, it happened to be white. That kind of enhanced the emotions because of the race. But had he been black, there's no doubt in my mind that Minneapolis would still be burning today.
Right. Yes, sir. Okay. All right, brother E, man, it's been real. And thank you for coming on, man. We appreciate you 1,000%. Any last words? The brother said he is not running. Everybody keeps talking about you need to run for office. The brother said he's not doing that right now. But it's good so many people respect you like that to actually, to really say that, man, like throughout this whole feed. Like, so that really speaks a lot, man. Like it does.
Real quick, I'm gonna leave. Policing is a noble profession. I love what I do, and there's many others like me that really love what they do. And we hate to be, put in that same basket with the bad officers. Yes, we do have bad officers. Yes, we have racism in this country. It exists. So my goal here is to do my best to educate the community and how to make change, how to affect change. And my goal here is to really educate our young kids, our youth, because if we want to make change, it starts at that level, because the older guys are set in their ways.
Right.
Let's forget about them to a point, and let's start educating our high schoolers, our middle schoolers, the kids that's in college, and let's try to encourage them to become part of the system.
Yes, sir. All right, brother, man. Appreciate you 1,000%, man. Yes, sir.